According to federal prosecutors, one Bronx tax preparer became so good at making his customers' tax bills disappear, they gave him a nickname, the magician. But there was no secret tax strategy, and by the time this story was over, the IRS tax loss was $145 million.
Now the business looking clean, money coming through, everybody asking who helped me break through. The tax guru got me thinking bigger now.
I'm Tyrone Taylor, enrolled agent. Case file 032, the tax preparer they called the magician. His name is Rafael Alvarez. Alvarez was the owner, CEO, and manager of ATAX New York, a high-volume tax preparation company in the Bronx. And when I say high volume, I mean high volume. From around 2010 to 2020, ATAX prepared approximately 90,000 federal income tax returns. Now, I want you to remember something. That does not mean all 90,000 returns were fraudulent. But according to the DOJ, Alvarez oversaw the filing of tens of thousands of false returns. And apparently the results were impressive enough that customers started calling him the magician. So how was he making these tax bills disappear? Well, let me explain something first. There are very legitimate ways to reduce your taxes. The tax code gives taxpayers deductions and credits. Businesses can also deduct legitimate business expenses and receive tax credits. Capital losses can sometimes reduce taxable income. All of that can be perfectly legal. But here's the part that matters. You actually have to qualify for them. You can't just put a number on a tax return because it produces the result you want. And according to federal prosecutors, that was the problem at ATAX. The government says the returns included bogus itemized deductions, made-up capital losses, phony business expenses, and fraudulent tax credits. Those false entries reduced customers' tax liabilities or increased their refunds. And Alvarez wasn't just sitting at a desk preparing all these returns himself. According to the Department of Justice, he recruited, supervised, trained, and directed other people at ATAX who prepared returns. And this is where the story gets even more serious. DOJ says Alvarez specifically recruited workers it described as impressionable and easily intimidated. Some employees started questioning what was happening with the returns, and according to prosecutors, Alvarez intimidated and threatened employees who questioned the fraudulent preparation of returns to discourage them from reporting the scheme. Now think about where we are in this story. This isn't one preparer making one questionable deduction. You've got a tax preparation business handling thousands and thousands of returns. You've got employees preparing returns. You've got reoccurring false deductions, losses, expenses, and credits. And eventually, you've got the IRS asking questions. The public record gives us an important glimpse into that scrutiny. According to the original indictment, an IRS revenue agent requested an interview in 2017 involving a person whose identity was connected to a preparer tax identification number, or PTIN. The indictment contained additional identity-related allegations about an ATAX employee. But I want to be perfectly clear here. Those were allegations in the indictment, and Alvarez did not ultimately plead guilty to aggravated identity theft. What he did later admit is important enough on its own. As part of his guilty plea, Alvarez admitted that he and an ATAX employee made false statements to an IRS revenue agent during the tax fraud investigation. He also admitted attempting to obstruct or impede the administration of justice with respect to that investigation. And here's another part of this case that taxpayers may not realize. The criminal prosecution wasn't the government's first major action against Alvarez. Back in 2021, the government filed a civil lawsuit seeking to stop Alvarez and ATAX from preparing any federal tax returns. By June of that year, Alvarez and ATAX had agreed to a permanent injunction barring them from preparing federal returns for other people. Then, nearly 3 years later, in April 2024, the criminal indictment was unsealed and Alvarez was arrested. That's an important tax enforcement lesson. People sometimes imagine IRS enforcement in one straight line: an audit, an investigation, and then handcuffs. But that's not necessarily how it works. Civil enforcement and criminal enforcement are two different tools. And this case shows how government action can develop over years. Now let's get back to that number, because eventually The government calculated the tax loss from fraudulent returns, 145 million. The 145 million represented tax revenue lost by the IRS. DOJ says Alvarez's operations of ATAX helped the company generate approximately $12 million in fraudulent proceeds during the fraud. And eventually, Alvarez was ordered to forfeit more than 11.84 million. On December 17, 2024, Alvarez pled guilty to 2 counts: conspiracy to defraud the United States and steal government funds, and aiding and assisting in the preparation of a false and fraudulent U.S. individual income tax return. Then came the sentencing. On May 29, 2025, a federal judge sentenced Rafael Alvarez to 4 years in federal prison. He also received 3 years of supervised release, and he was ordered to pay $145 million in restitution to the IRS, and he was ordered to forfeit more than $11.84 million in fraudulent proceeds. IRS criminal investigations later ranked the prosecution up number 7 among its top 10 cases in 2025. Now here's my tax guru take. Here's the part of this story I really want taxpayers to understand. Your tax preparer prepares a return, but it's your name on that return, and ultimately you're responsible for the information being reported. So imagine if you normally get a $1,500 refund, and then you go to a new preparer and suddenly you're getting $8,000. Does that automatically mean something illegal happened? No. Maybe you qualify for something the previous preparer missed. Maybe your circumstances change. Maybe the new number is completely legitimate. But you need to ask one very important question. Why? Why did my refund change? Where did this deduction come from? What is this business expense? Why is there a capital loss on my return? What credit am I claiming? Who is listed as my dependent? And what filing status did you use? Because if the explanation is basically, oh, don't worry about it, I know what I'm doing, that is not an explanation. A good preparer should be able to explain what is on your tax return. And if you're claiming something that requires documentation, don't be surprised when a legitimate preparer starts asking you for records, receipts, statements, mileage information, business expenses, whatever supports what's actually being reported. That isn't your preparer making things difficult. That's part of preparing a defensible tax return. And remember something else. A big refund isn't the problem. A legitimate deduction isn't the problem. And a legitimate credit isn't the problem. The problem is when somebody starts inventing facts to manufacture the tax results. That's the lesson behind the magician. If your tax preparer can magically get you a refund nobody else can, make sure the magic isn't just numbers they made up. Review your return before you sign it. Ask questions when something doesn't make sense. And understand what is being filed under your name. If you enjoy learning how the tax system actually works through real federal tax cases, follow that tax guru. Because the crime gets your attention, but understanding the tax lesson can protect you. Real tax crimes, real court cases, real lessons, that tax guru tax crime file stories.
Took a stand out of business looking clean. Money coming through, everybody asking who helped me break through. The tax guru.